Okay, so the damned dozen are heading to a warp train. And this was terrifying in itself, although that was to come. There would be something more immediately threatening before that. Okay, here's a brief recap. With the conclusion of the case of Time-Killing Time, which involved an update on the Urodivier's current situation, where they were found to be more widespread than previously thought, yes, much has changed in the last 9 months. In-game, of course. Sadly, the one that, became the distortion known as the Time Ripper was less patient than they are. So he decided to rip away the time of those that wasted it with tedium. The distortion was eventually defeated, and Rodia had much to think about. And then Virgilius revealed that they're heading towards a warp train station, which was enough to get the damned dozen to go to brown alerts, based on what they knew about the warp trains. Well, those that had W-Corp identities, anyway. Sometime after, Dante was concluding a consultation with Heathcliff in their room. They've been doing this regularly for a while, and not just with Heathcliff. This one with Heathcliff ended earlier than expected. Dante then asked what he was writing in that notebook. Apparently, it was to write it down, in case it became useful later, in case he had to remember something. Dante saw that he's been holding on to that since the session started. He wasn't making a full record of their conversation. It was more like he was writing things down on it, worthy of remembering. So he's getting to the point with what he needs to remember while disregarding the rest. Dante asks if he's writing about Catherine. Heathcliff didn't deny that was part of it. Now, that was a complex subject. He breathed in and let out a deep sigh. He slid the notebook in their direction while smiling awkwardly. The contents were as disorganized and chaotic as his handwriting. Among those notes were memories with Catherine with significant moments of the journey. He didn't want to lose those memories. He denied that it was important, seeing as they were done for now. He was off, and walked out of the office, taking the notebook with him, with a bitter expression on his face. Then Rodia burst through the door. She saw Heathcliff leaving, so she decided that it was her turn, observing that it was a quick meeting. And Dante confirmed this. They didn't talk much, or at least not about anything that would be recognized by anyone. Well, anyone but Heathcliff and Dante, as they were the ones, the only ones working for Limbus Company that was immune to the memory wipe of Catherine's existence. Well, could be worse. In most other universes, her entire existence was erased. Rodia thought that he was tame recently. Dante wasn't complaining, asking her to take a seat. She did so, humming cheerfully, appearing not too different from her usual self. Usually their consultations consisted of minor chit-chats, and her munching on snacks, but not this time. Dante had something to talk about that day, and this worried Rodia, claiming that they're so serious that day, asking what was up, hoping it wasn't that subject. Sadly for her, it was. Dante asked her if she remembered what she asked them when they were dealing with the case of time killing time. She claimed not to remember asking what she said. Dante knew that it was a lot. Rodia looked away carefully, fiddling with the snacks prepared for those consultations. Likely purchased by Dante for others, as they didn't seem to be able to eat as the others could. And they were likely an employee with pay regardless. Dante was starting to grow uncertain whether it's a good time to bring up that subject, when she is obviously evasive about it. Not wanting to have the mood get as frosty as it did during the investigation, but they knew that this overly chipper, chatty attitude was just a bandage haphazardly pulled over a scar that still hurts. They had to ask Rodia about her growing doubts about her decision not to rejoin the Eurodivia in District 10, as they saw her fabricated smile. In fact, it's what these consultations are for dealing with issues that might bite them in the later. It's a good time to ask, but just as Dante was about to ask her about that time that she asked them about Sonia, about what would have happened if she... Then Dante found themselves a victim of their own bad timing, as the alarm went off, just as they gathered the courage to ask this. If Dante had their human head, they'd probably be silently screaming right now. They were this annoyed, but couldn't vocalize this. They knew what the alarm was, so they got to their feet. Then someone got to the bus PA system. It was Urtis, who ordered all units taking R&R on the bus to assemble in the hallway ASAP. And just as she was about to repeat this, Karan told her that the driver's seat was her seat, who proceeded to pull Urtis away as she complained about this. As she was in the process of relaying a very important announcement, then Karan almost sounded like a yandere when she said, "Stop getting in the way between Karan and Mephi." Virgilius sounded mildly annoyed before the PA stopped. Rodia knew that this alarm meant that the back doors had something new. Dante suspected that this was a new refraction railway. Yes, a new refraction railway. This wasn't to Rodia's taste, as they were so exhausting. She grumbled as she rose from her seat, although secretly this was something of a relief, as they didn't need to ask Dante's question. So she decided to avoid it, for now. She then asked, "What's there standing around there for? Don't they want to see what's going on?" Then they would come. Clearly they didn't have time to do the consultation, as their notes regarding Rodia were empty. They followed Rodia out of the hallway. Or rather out to the hallway, which was very crowded. Each of them had an idea of what the alarm might be for. Sinclair believed it to be a refraction railway this time. Gregor agreed. Well, yes, he agreed as... Well, he suspected that it was Line 4, believing that this was going to suck. Then Urtis shouted at them to stand to attention, as Dante had arrived, who told them that she had assembled their forces in a timely manner. Dante thanked her, slightly nervously. Faust then welcomed Dante, who asked her if this was a refraction railway this time. Faust confirmed their suspicions. Rodia claimed to be getting used to this. Ryushu angrily said WTHAWGI, Don Quixote thought it meant, "Whoa, 'tis hearkening at." Gregor thought it meant, "What the hell?" Yi-Sang thought that she wanted information regarding when they were heading in, or as Sinclair correctly translated, "When the hell are we going in?" The haphazard guesses were annoying Ryushu, but she was finally understood, so she relaxed somewhat. They were catching on to what was going to happen. Dante wanted to check this now. Yes, check this out now. Don Quixote opened the gates. The platform for the 4th Refraction Railway had a blue light and had comedy and tragedy mask motifs decorating the walls. It almost seemed to drop the temperature of the entire room. The last one had an orange hue. Don Quixote thought that a party was before them, because of the curtains and the masks around them. Well, let's just say I doubt that they're hosting the musical version of Phantom of the Opera there. Dante noticed the decor, and Don Quixote ran off again and confirmed what she said about the decor, questioning if it reflected the theme of their enemies. Then Don Quixote stopped and found a woman that appeared to be identical to Utis, which surprised Utis, and Dante quickly ran to where Don Quixote was, with the others following. Then there was a copy of Utis, and Dante hoped that this wasn't serious. Gregor realized that she wasn't kidding. Sinclair hoped that this wasn't a lure left behind by an abnormality. Heathcliff basically told him to not say that. Honglu noted that this copy of Otis was quiet and shrouded in a weird shadow. 2 clear differences to the original. Then he saw one that looked like him. The copy mimics every move he made. Dante recognized it as looking like one of Honglu's identities. Then 3 more of them appeared. Otis thought that it would have been better if they were part of an abnormality, or, well, if they're clones, they must move swiftly to exterminate them, recommending that they immediately order them to prepare for battle. Dante needed to consult Faust first. Otis urged him to make a judgment call now, as if they're clones, then the head will... Yeah, best not to provoke the head, as few have met them, and even fewer live to speak of the encounter. Dante had never seen her so adamant about them making this kind of a decision. Yi-Sang noticed this and stepped in between them. He asked Faust what she knew about this. Faust made it clear that they are not clones, so the head will not come for them even if a week had passed. Ah yes, the cloning law that prevents more than one iteration of the same person to be alive for one real-time week. Likely a law created to minimize the risk of ArcCorp trying to take over with its clone army. Yes, a failsafe. Then Dante said that what they're seeing feels like a Picatulum. Otis was surprised at this. Ishmael could figure out that it's blindly mimicking whatever Honglu is doing. Well, it can be comparable to some species of birds copying human voices, and even sounds like chainsaws going off, copying it without understanding what it is they're copying. Although what they're seeing is an exact physical copy of themselves, but without the consciousness or ego. Yi-Sang wanted Otis to calm herself, as this was nothing to be too concerned about. At least not involving the head. This embarrassed her. She apologized for her unsightly manner before them. Dante was learning more about the damned dozen from this, but just as they were looking more deeply into her expression, Heathcliff asked the question out loud. He asked if the Pecatula are supposed to look like monsters. Faust more or less said that he shouldn't base his judgment based on physical appearance. Yes, don't judge on physical appearance. Sinclair asked if they could handle them. Ishmael was concerned as if they swarm them like in Wuthering Heights or copy Virgilius, they're boned. Yisang didn't think so, as in the other Refraction railways, they didn't face opponents that were impossible for them to defeat. But it won't make it that easy for them. Faust confirmed this, while adding that this was Pecatulum Invidiae, or the Pecatulum of Envy. Masqerade commented that a lack of precise tiered labelling system meant that it was difficult for one to make a subjective judgment. Ishmael agreed, asking when the new risk levels and classifications for Pecatula and distortions were coming. Faust informed them that while the LCD had made significant progress in that, it's not done yet. It was still good to know for Honglu. Then he saw that the new Pecatula was running away, shoving him aside as they were talking about them. This angered Heathcliff, telling them not to just stand there as they're legging it. He went after them, but came to a sudden stop before slowly backing away. He was shocked by what he saw. A subway train that slid onto the platform with a loud horn. It was filled with this new kind of Pecatula, each appearing as a different variant of each of the damned dozen. Gregor noted that there was a lot of them. Sinclair could see at least 3 that looked like him. They all stopped dead in their tracks. This allowed the Pecatulum that they were pursuing to board the subway car. The door shut behind them, and Yisang heard only quiet from the Refraction railway. Gregor then saw another subway car coming, which rolled in as the previous one left the station. This one was empty. Dante asked what that was. Those Pecatulum were new, especially as they boarded a subway car that went ahead. Ryushu saw it as uninspired. Rodia, now that she wasn't distracted by the clone confusion, she asked if the train looked more elaborate than the previous ones. Honglu confirmed this as it was adorned with all kinds of decorations. As they were talking about this, a red carpet came out of the train car door. This worried Sinclair. Dante saw this as an invitation. Yisang didn't like the context of this invitation. Dante agreed with him, but they're likely to encounter worse things in the future, so they'll take what chances they can get to get stronger. Yes, to grow stronger, rather. Dante told them to go in. They all boarded the subway train and found that it was another line, as in a linear journey, although this one that was a clear beginning and end was different. It was split into 7 parts. 3 rest stops and 4 large fight stops, or what appeared to be that. They were 4 sections. Dante wasn't sure how this would work, but they'll find out soon enough. As they encountered the first section of the 4th refraction line, the door opened, and their surroundings reminded those with the bygone days Egeo of that abnormality. They understood that they would be fighting it there, and Dante would need to choose wisely the order of selection, as the order would matter. The first would be one with 2 more identity levels. The second would have +3 SP heal efficiency and start with 10 more SP. The third would have 2 more offense level, being able to cause more damage. The fourth would have a higher defense level, meaning less damage would be taken when blocking. The fifth would have 2 more max speed. The sixth would have 5% more maximum HP. As for the rest, they could be selected as backups. The seventh would have 1 more clash power and 15 more starting SP. The eighth would receive 10% less damage and have 15 starting SP. The ninth would receive 5 aggro and 20 starting SP. The 10th would have 10% more damage dealt to the enemy and 20 starting SP. The 11th would have 1 more final power and 30 starting SP. And the 12th would have 3 more identity level and a starting SP of 30. Now, the max speed selection would benefit sunk association identities most, as they benefit from more speed. As for the aggro increasing, that would benefit those that would take the beating more, such as dicey association identities or Massault's Rhino identity. Regardless, once Dante chose the order, they decided to confront this abnormality, and they found out that this was in waves, meaning that once this abnormality was defeated, the next wave would come, and they would have to fight that as well, even with any injuries that might occur. And their first opponent was the Portrait of a Certain Day. This abnormality attacks mostly with sinking, which can be devastating to SP, although it also has paralysis infliction, which can make it harder to get good rolls. It also can inflict Sinking Deluge, which deals SP damage by the sinking count multiplied by potency, or if the SP is at -45, then any excess SP damage is converted to gloom damage. It can also inflict Interloper, which can increase attack weight and clash power by the number of enemies that has this. Although when the portraits are summoned, it's more resistant to damage until the Master's Portrait is defeated, which can make it weaker. If the Master's Portrait isn't defeated within 3 turns, then the remaining fake portraits are burned, and double the amount of them is inflicted on all of this abnormality's enemies in sinking. And it can hit harder and take more of a beating for a time. When the abnormality summons the portraits for the first time, an event occurs when it says that it is the butler of that manor, yet it doesn't recognize their faces. It couldn't help but be wary, asking if they seek to mire that manor in sorrow, asking if they claim otherwise. Which of those portraits is its master? A check occurs, and if the chosen passed, they stepped forward and pointed to one of the portraits. It stood still for a moment and replied that they're familiar with its master. Though they're an interloper, they are not a bringer of sorrow, and was somewhat less hostile. And it hit less hard than before. If the check fails, it cried out that the Chosen didn't recognize its master. They were an interloper there, to bring sorrow to that place once again. How dare they pretend to know that which they do not? This transgression wouldn't easily be forgiven. The gaze of each portrait was focused on the Chosen, each holding resentment, and the Chosen would receive 30 SP damage. It would repeat the cycle of summoning portraits and using its standard attacks until defeated. The sunken-headed being that was apparently the butler of that manor. Then they fought the Wuthering Heights butlers. In the next part of that section, or what appear to be them, in an arena that looks like Catherine's room, which included Josephine and even a distorted version of Hindley. While they lacked the immense power of Portrait of a Certain Day, they made up for it in numbers. Heathcliff was especially troubled by this reminder of what happened around a week ago, as this reminded him of what he lost. The butlers that treated him worse than a dog, the brother of his love that blamed him for his own failings, who was ultimately consumed by them. Then, after all of them were defeated, they fought against Nellie, or an image of her, and this was also painful for Heathcliff, as she took the golden bar and made it clear that she was throwing in her lot with Encore, essentially spitting on Heathcliff's kindness by freeing her from her servitude, as she wanted. Well, if it weren't for her contract, she would have done so without his permission, or indeed the permission of anyone. One that he knew that he'd have to deal with at some point in the future. They all fought this image of Nellie as where they fought the original, and found that this was easier than last time. After that battle, they returned to the subway car and moved on to the rest stop. Any that was killed could be brought back there, and Dante realized what the backup section was for, where if one of them was killed, one of the backups, in the order selected, could step in and continue the fight. They also knew that they had to defeat all the waves of each section to move on, which will be a mix of the familiar and the new. There have been 3 new abnormalities in each Refraction railway. Yes, abnormalities that haven't been encountered before, either outside the bus or in the mirror dungeon. One of them has been defeated, so 2 more should remain to fight. Dante considered this as they headed to Section 2 of this Refraction railway. As they arrived at Section 2, they found themselves back in Col, and this was triggering to Sinclair as it was an unwelcome reminder of his past. He was then reminded by the others that Chroma was dead and they were not going to fight her, especially as she was previously fought in a different Refraction railway line. But what was before them was even stranger. It was all 6 of the Encore identities, with the one looking like Faust being Chroma's role, the one looking like Masson being in Guido's role, and a version of Sinclair that joined Encore instead of rejecting them. Sinclair saw him as a vision of what he would have become if he let the insanity of Chroma consume him. Thankfully, despite her best efforts, she failed, and all that was left was to deal with the peccatulum of envy that peered at them. These peccatulum revealed what they could do. They were capable of the same skills as the Damned Dozen were capable of when wielding their identities. They could also wield EGO like them, although they were silent when successfully using them. They did, however, follow the same rules as the originals, certainly with sanity, as if theirs fails, well, if it falls, rather, to -45, they can be EGO corroded as well. After defeating them, they found themselves in the building where they found the monolith. While facing the Kurokumo clan, they fought through them as they did with the originals, along with what appeared to be Captain Jun. They understood that they focused on bleeding their enemies, and Jun especially was more dangerous, when backed up by his subordinates. They fought their way through them until they encountered more NV Pecatulum, this time with Blade lineage identities, with Masol in Bamboo-Hatted Kim's role. They were in an arena based on the Fathoms of Ego that was based on District 19. The Sinners understood that the Blade lineage identities relied mostly on critical attacks, where if they hit, they could cause significant damage, and if Masol was attacked when using Yield My Flesh, he'd use a powerful attack called To Claim My Bones to cause significant damage, essentially taking the beating in order to dish it out stronger. This reminded them of what they dealt with before reaching Wuthering Heights, along with their first conversations with Moses and Ezra, who was part of the distortion departments, and that the monolith was capable of forcing distortion to the point where the distortions might become abnormalities. After their battle with these uglier versions of Dittos, they reached their next rest stop. Dante healed and brought back those that needed it, and then they headed to the next section. In Section 3, they encountered more NV Pecatulum, although this time they were an assortment of different identities, not a themed set this time, starting with Rabbit Team Heathcliff, W Corp Don Quixote, W Corp Ryushu, K Corp Hong Lu, Rhino Team Masol, and 7 Association Faust, although this time the NV Pecatulum had a backup system as well, because as each of the original 6 were killed, another took their place, starting with 7 Association Ultis, then Ring Pointerlist Yisang, Pigwad Captain Ishmael, Dicey Association Rodia, Zwei Association Gregor, and finally, Sunk Association Sinclair. Most of them were what I used personally in this Refraction railway. The damned dozen found it strange that they were fighting what appeared to be themselves, but they defeated all of them regardless. And then they encountered a purple-skied arena, and a large-looking sheep. And no, this isn't a rip-off of the Pokemon Marip. This is the Dreaming Electric Sheep abnormality. The damned dozen are reminded of their encounter within the Mirror Dungeon that made some feel bad about cutting off the power. But this sympathy didn't extend to now, as it's clearly trying to kill them. This abnormality gathered charge and relied on weakening the enemy's capacity to cause damage, along with resisting damage, and could even cause paralysis. The charge that is built up can also be used to increase attack weight, clash power, and even increase envy damage. although at the cost of all charge being used, and being unplugged from the generator. It even has a variant of this attack which is unclashable, but without the debuffs. It being plugged in can provide protection while using one attack, although with each plug that's plugged into it, one minimum speed value is gained, along with the ability to hit harder, but at the cost of being less able to take the beating. Although this enemy will react strongly when backed into a corner as near defeats, when at 25% health, the clashes on its side are stronger, it hits harder and is more vulnerable to damage, and this happens over time and is cumulative until it's defeated. When two plugs are in the abnormality, like all of the plugs that are at the end of each cable, and the sheep knew what it implied, it let out a sorrowful cry. As the others converged on it, its screams grew more desperate and great. It thrashed wildly. The resistance would intensify. A check would happen. If it passed, the Chosen would raise a cable and connect it to the sheep. This made violent sparks fill their vision. Then it cried terribly for a while before growing silent. It was silent as though in a dream. The Chosen would return from this seared with lightning. The abnormality would have 2 less clash power, but at the cost of the Chosen receiving 15 envy damage. If the check failed, then just as the Chosen was about to connect the cable with the sheep kicked them hard with its long legs, causing the Chosen to tumble and blankly stare at the halfway inserted cable. Then violent, screaming lightning directly smited them. The clash power of the abnormality would be down by 1, but the Chosen would receive 30 envy damage. After defeating this abnormality, which happens in spite of Cinquehair being pulverized, they arrive at the next rest stop. After healing and rewinding the Damned League, Dante realized something. The Envy Peccatulum had access to the Mirror Worlds, where they could assume different identities and appear in forms of those that they were connected to from any universe. They can also wield EGO and the skills of those identities, about as well as the originals. This made them the most dangerous of the Peccatulum, even more dangerous than the Stage 3 Wrath Peccatulum encountered in the basement of Wuthering Heights that was part of the Wild Hunt that Earl King Heathcliff summoned. After thinking about this, they proceeded to the final station, which was likely to be the worst yet. They saw the abnormality known as the King in Binds, who was observing its surroundings from a throne in a dark throne room. It wasn't going to fight them yet. The damned dozen were forced to fight more Envy Peccatulum, starting with Edgar family Chief Butler Ryushu, who was in Nelly's role, Edgar family heir Gregor, who was in Linton's role, Edgar family butler Ishmael, Wuthering Heights Chief Butler Utis, who was in Josephine's role, Wuthering Heights butler Faust, and Sunshower Heathcliff. As each of them was defeated, the backups appeared to take their places, including Dead Rabbit's boss Masson, who was in Matthew's role, Daisy Honglu, Daisy Rodia, Daisy Yisung, Sunk Association Don Quixote, and Sunk Association Sinclair. At the start of the battle, within that empty banquet hall, wreathed in ambient crimson lights, the King of Binds that was bound to his throne raised his arm in a hurried motion, the cold mist drenching everyone's feet. The king gently pointed to a platform near Dante within an inviting cadence. On it were masks, each depicting a different spectrum of emotions. There was a mask of joy, a mask of sorrow, and a mask of wrath. Don't worry, none of them will turn Dante into a green-headed bringer of mischief with reality-warping powers. What should be worn in an audience with the king in binds? If the mask of joy was worn, this would fill Dante with confidence. Nothing would seem out of reach. The others would be unbound by uncertainty. No respite was needed. A fleeting moment of joy for the eternal lone king. The damned dozen had expressions of boundless joy, a prelude to that banquet. This healed all by 20 SP. However, it did make any with negative coins lose 20 SP. 2 speed would be gained, and a grand welcome EGO gift would be received next turn, which would provide 1 pride and a random EGO resource if a target is staggered or defeated. Putting on the Mask of Sorrow made the omniscient pressure slowly evaporate. The others walked in silence without respite, a fleeting moment of solace for the lone eternal king, the damned dozen wearing expressions of solemn sorrow. This healed all by 20 SP, and made negative coins lose 20 SP, although it would grant 1 more clash power and a grand welcome EGO gift. Wearing the Mask of Wrath made Dante feel lighter, made their fists curl with great might, making the others feel passionate. No respite for them. The flames of joy sparked for the eternal lone king. Expressions of battle awaits the damned dozen. This healed, well, yes. Positive coin identities would get 20 SP. Negative coin identities would lose 20 SP. They would receive 1 more damage increase, buff, and the grand welcome EGO gift the following turn. Dante understood that these Peccatulum were the last line. Yes, the last line of defense, which was confirmed when all of them were killed. The king in binds then rose from its throne and decided to deal with these interlopers personally. The passion grew hotter as the banquet slowly reached a crescendo. The king in binds motioned for the battle to pause, granting enough time to leave their broken masks and don new ones for themselves. As for the new face chosen, if the Mask of Joy was chosen, this made Dante's thoughts refreshingly clear, healing all by 15 SP. Except those with minus coin identities, they get healed by 10 SP. If the Mask of Sorrow was chosen, the damned dozen absorbed its strength and determination like sponges, granting 2 of each EGO resource. If the Mask of Wrath was chosen, this caused the others to be compelled to fiercely grasp their weapons and get buffed by 1 more damage increase. Whichever was chosen, this summoned the ardent emotions that slowly simmered into Dante's heart. This sorrow rose through the fog of battle, which pierced deep into their emotions with its dense weight. Then a check happened. If the check passed, then the sorrowful pressure relented. But the banquet was far from over. The damned dozen each rose and shook off the gloom. the voice in their hearts filled with determination. All sinking potency and counts would be halved. However, if the check failed, this made the deluge of sorrow cause the others to sweep them off their feet into an even deeper chasm. The banquet continued. They repressed their sorrows and continued. Nothing happened after that besides the battle continuing. Now this abnormality relies on sinking just as Portrait of a Certain Day did, although it also bound its enemies, slowing them down, along with delivering tremor equal to the amount of sinking that they have, while shaking things up with a tremor. It even has an unclashable variant of this attack, which inflicts bind, an increase in attack power, and a moment of audience, where up to 2 additional attack weight is granted based on the attack skill amount. Although this also makes it fragile if it loses the clash. It can also apply 300 shield to any with bandages of the king in binds. Or of binds. Well, whatever you call it, that's what it does. Apparently, this is applied when one attack loses the clash or if a body part is destroyed. Heathcliff thought that this abnormality represents some weird. Faust was about to give a lecture on how he shouldn't make assumptions, but Ishmael interrupted her, saying, "Save it for when we're not in immediate danger, we've got an abnormality to fight." After the abnormality was defeated, which was admired by Utis, strangely, they reached the end of the Refraction Railway. They were all tired after all that fighting, so Virgilius, who was observing this, ordered them to get back to their rooms to rest up, as they fought enough for one day. But not before all of the rewards were claimed by Dante. They would make good use of what was earned, when there was an opportunity to do so. They knew the warp train was ahead of them, but they were better prepared than they were previously. Well, it looks like Murder on the Warp Express will be next for this. Until next time, Hail the rabbit!